Coming up in today's newscast, Syria threatens to attack Ben Gurion Airport at the United Nations. A new report exposes the widespread support for BDS in the European Union, and a French immigrant couple hits the Israeli jackpot. The Syrian ambassador to the United Nations has just threatened on Tuesday to attack Ben Gurion International Airport near Tel Aviv in response to Israel's aerial strikes earlier this week in Damascus. Speaking at a UN Security Council meeting on the Middle East in New York, the Syrian envoy Bashar Jafari called on the UN to prevent any further Israeli airstrikes on Syria. He asked, quote, "Isn't it high time for this council to take the necessary measures to stop the repeated Israeli aggression against the territories of my country? Or should we attract the attention of the war makers in this council by exercising our legitimate right to self-defense and respond to the Israeli aggression against the Damascus International Civil Airport by launching an aggression of our own against the Tel Aviv Airport?" End quote. He also then criticized permanent UN Security Council members, the United States, the UK, and France, who he said are partners and supporters of Israel in its aggressions. He added that the UN Security Council would end up being irrelevant, like the League of Nations before it, should it not act against Israel. Now, while Israel has hit thousands of targets in Syria in recent years in an attempt to curb Iranian and Hezbollah activities in the country, Syria has almost never responded. But the Syrian envoy's remarks at the UN coincide with another unusual event, the launching of an Iranian surface-to-surface missile into the Golan Heights on Sunday, which was intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system over a Mount Hermon ski resort. This is what prompted Israel to launch strikes on Iranian targets near Damascus, including at the Damascus International Airport. This unusual activity from Iran and Syria, however, has led some experts in the defense establishment to believe that Iran is stepping up its response to Israeli attacks in light of the end of the Syrian civil war and the United States troop withdrawal from the country. Yet, thankfully, experts also say that the possibility that this will escalate into a full-out war is still quite low. Now, in related news, United Nations Middle East envoy Nikolai Mladenov has just addressed the United Nations Security Council on Tuesday, where he revealed that to this day, no United Nations peacekeeping forces in Lebanon have yet been given access to Hezbollah's terror tunnels. After seeing the tunnels from the northern Israeli side, however, the UN has at least concluded that the tunnels do violate Ceasefire Resolution 1701. Though Mladenov did not detail why UNIFIL, or United Nations interim forces in Lebanon, were denied access, whether they were blocked by Hezbollah militants or indeed the Lebanese government, either way, most officials at this time point their fingers at the government. In fact, United States Deputy Ambassador Jonathan Cohen said that the United States commended UNIFIL's work at keeping the Blue Line under control, but that, quote, "it is unacceptable that the Lebanese government has not yet given UNIFIL access to the tunnel entrance on their side of the Blue Line," end quote. And likewise, United States Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs David Hale criticized the Lebanese government last week.
And we are proceeding with our efforts to counter Iran's dangerous activities around the region, including the financing and activities of proxy terrorist organizations such as Hezbollah. And while Lebanon has the right to defend itself, that is a right of the Lebanese state alone. It is unacceptable to have a militia outside the control of the state and unanswerable to all the people of Lebanon, digging attack tunnels across the Blue Line into Israel or assembling an arsenal of over 100,000 missiles with which to threaten regional stability.
And finally, Israeli United Nations Ambassador Dani Danon also complained that the Lebanese army has done nothing to prevent Hezbollah from building these terror tunnels unimpeded. He also blasted the billions of dollars in terror funding that Iran doles out in the region to multiple militant proxy groups, including Hezbollah. But unfortunately, at least for now, it doesn't appear like the Lebanese will be capable of doing much against Hezbollah's aggression. As Mladenov mentioned, the nation has been without an official government for over 8 months now, and at any rate, Hezbollah itself is a large faction within that parliament. Amidst ongoing rioting along the Gaza border overnight on Tuesday, a company commander with the Israeli paratroopers unit was lightly wounded by Hamas sniper fire. Thankfully, however, the bullet only grazed the soldier's helmet, and he was released from the hospital hours later. Meanwhile, during those same riots, 5 Palestinian suspects attempted to breach the security fence with Israel, 2 of whom were successful, though the group turned around as fast as they entered. Still, the IDF responded immediately to the above incidents with tank shellings of a Hamas post in the Strip, injuring at least 2 Hamas members and killing a 3rd. Then the Air Force launched a series of strikes against various Hamas targets in Gaza as well. Then finally, as a final punitive measure against violence in the Strip, Prime Minister and Defense Minister Netanyahu ordered that the third Qatari installment of $15 million to Hamas in Gaza be halted en route. The payment was already approved, however, and Hamas officials speaking to the Times of Israel said that, quote, Netanyahu's decision to prevent their entry is a crime that will push Gaza towards an explosion, end quote. Further, speaking to Army Radio on Wednesday morning, former Shin Bet head Yaakov Peri says Israel should allow the Qatari funding as well because, quote, Hamas will not become a lover of Israel because of this money or the lack thereof. So Israel needs to act according to its own interest, which is to avoid confrontation. If the same Qatari funds cause a confrontation not to occur, the broader consideration must prevail, end quote. Still, allowing millions of dollars to enter untraceably into Gaza for use by the Hamas terror group is not a popular decision, especially as Hamas has never relinquished its vow to destroy the Jewish state and rarely desists from violent acts anyway. Speaking to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland via satellite link, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said on Tuesday that the United States will work to resolve the primary differences between the Israelis and the Palestinians in order to reach a peace deal. While Pompeo didn't get into any specifics, though, he did say that the work would begin following the Israeli elections, which are set for April 9th. The long-awaited United States peace plan has been a work in progress ever since United States President Donald Trump took office. And while Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt have long been developing the plan, the administration has repeatedly postponed its announcement and has refused to divulge any information or details on the plan.
It seems to me that we're at a point in time where there are ways that we can resolve the primary differences and encourage those two places, the Israelis and the Palestinians, to come together to resolve their differences and get a solution there that has bedeviled the world for an awfully long time.
Now, regarding the broader region, Pompeo said that the United States would not act alone to face regional threats and other issues, adding that, quote, we will need coalitions built out to ensure that there's Middle East stability for our effort to develop our Middle East Strategic Alliance program. And he added that this program would involve countries in the region who would protect themselves together with America as their partner in that fight. The United States Secretary of State also then addressed the threat posed by the Islamic Republic of Iran, which he said is very real, explaining that Iran is a malign actor and that that's why we're so happy that the coalition that we've built out is so central to creating the stability that the people of the Middle East so richly deserve. And finally, Pompeo also said that he was looking forward to the meeting scheduled next month in Warsaw, Poland, where world leaders are set to talk about Iran and other issues in the Middle East more deeply. Making major headlines today, Strategic Affairs and Public Security Minister Gilad Erdan has just released a new report which reveals that the European Union invested over €5 million in at least 10 pro-BDS and anti-Israel organizations between 2017 and 2018. This despite having clear policies and assurances against such actions, including from EU Foreign Policy Chief Federica Mogherini herself. And chief among the top 10 groups are Ramallah-based Al-Haq and the Gaza-based Al-Mizan Center for Human Rights. These two alone were given nearly €750,000 between them, and they regularly promote anti-Israel boycotts as well as motions against Israel at The Hague and in the international arena. Well, joining me now with more is Dr. Natan Aridan, an Israel and diaspora specialist at the Ben Gurion Research Institute for the Study of Israel and Zionism. Doctor, thank you so much for coming in.
Pleasure.
All right, so first of all, what do you make of this latest report? Are you surprised by its findings? Let's start with that.
I'm not surprised by its findings at all. The fact of the matter is that there is what we call disingenuousness of organizations under the cover of legitimate criticism of Israel, which are basically based on boycott, disinvestment from Israel, and delegitimization of Israel as a state which has been recognized by 165 countries.
I see. All right, so what actions, if any, can be taken to ameliorate this or to hold the EU maybe to its word? And is it possible, perhaps, because I mentioned Federica Mogherini, is it possible that she and other officials in the EU didn't know that this money was going to these organizations?
They knew that the money was going to these organizations. They chose to understand it in a different format. For instance, if the money was going to IRA supporters for liberation through militant struggle to reunite Ireland, then the British would be literally up in arms. But this isn't the case. And there is no transparency on these organizations whatsoever, and it is a disgrace. But Israel is not part of the EU, and I'm not quite sure what leverage Israel has.
So again, bouncing off of that, going back to kind of my initial question is, what can be done?
What can be done basically is an important information campaign. There are those who hate us, and therefore it doesn't matter, no matter how much we explain, they will still hate us. But we can basically go to members of Parliament, of the European Parliament, to ask questions, to be able to table resolutions. And I think this is an important fact. The other important thing is not every organization that is critical of Israel is anti-Semitic.
Sure.
But without any doubt, those behind the BDS, and I choose my words very carefully, are on a whole based on anti-Semitic, because Israel is the only country which is picked out, the only country for boycotting. I don't have to explain all the other countries in the world which have terrible records on human rights.
Well, that goes back to the 3Ds, which you alluded to earlier. The double standard against Israel, which you just mentioned, the demonization of the Jewish state as a Jewish state, and of course the delegitimization of Israel's right to exist. So, how persistent are those values in the EU then? The 3Ds. How often do we see them in the EU and where they put their money?
Well, basically where they put their money is depending on various organizations, and I'm saying that we have to call them and hold them to account. One of the important things, for instance, is indigenousness, that delegitimization of Israel as a legitimate state, that the Jews are not indigenous. That, for instance, the work of Professor Ilan Troin at our institute, and also Dr. Chavatzelit Yechel, this isn't a political stance, but it's something which needs to be exposed.
And it certainly feeds political stances.
It feeds political stances, and as I said, if this was money going to ETA for the Basques, for instance, or anything else, this wouldn't be acceptable. And this is something that we face in Israel, of double standards. But as we need to hold members of the European Parliament to hold them to culpable. Yes.
All right, Dr. Aridan, thank you so much for coming in.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure to have you.
Okay, thank you.
First located in Qumran in 1947 by local Bedouins, the Dead Sea Scrolls have long been enchanting people with their rare insights into Jewish and Middle Eastern life, both before, during, and after the time of Jesus. And in the years since that first discovery, many more scrolls and other historical artifacts and fragments have been found in the area. But as hundreds of caves remain unsearched and antiquities thieves and other such explorers are still very much a threat, IAA archaeologists and their colleagues are today feeling a lot more pressure to pick up the pace. Now, excavations never ended, but they were dramatically slowed down over the last few years.
Well, simply people thought there was nothing left to find. They said it had been lost in antiquity, or the Bedouin looters, particularly during the Jordanian occupation, had taken it all away. And so there just wasn't incentive to do this.
But now, all that has rapidly changed.
In the last few years, we noticed that new pieces of scrolls and parchments arrived to the black market in the old city of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Hebron. And we realized that the Bedouin returned to the caves and started to dig again and to look for more scrolls and parchments. So it drives us to return to the caves and to be ahead of them. hopefully this time.
ההנחה היא שיש עדיין פריטים בתוך המערות שמחכים להתגלות. ואז השאלה היא מי יגלה אותם.
Further adding to the urgency is a recent discovery revealed a few months ago that at least 5 fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls in an American collection in Washington were fake. That being said, while scroll fragments are today extremely rare to find, the latest excavations are still being conducted with a high and refreshed hope.
We're doing our own exploration. This cave we're looking at now came through exploration. It wasn't on any survey. And so in that case, we're trying to just do original work to see what we can find. And in this case, to see if these higher caves actually held scrolls, as did the lower caves.
And archaeologist Oren Gutfeld explains that their efforts haven't been completely in vain either. He said that, quote, "From the first bucket we took out of the cave, we've been sifting out pottery fragments, and we found vessels and organic material, including hundreds of olive pits, dates, seeds, and nuts," end quote. They've also found ropes, jars, lids, an intact decorated bronze pot, and much, much more. And it's all extremely valuable, as it fills in the gaps in our understanding regarding how the daily lives of our ancestors may have looked. As for the Dead Sea Scrolls themselves, they've been hailed as one of the greatest discoveries of our time, and include at least 230 religious texts from nearly every book of the Bible, as well as secular accounts of life at the time of the Second Temple period. Now, much to the joy of Israeli farmers and environmentalists, this winter has seen unusually heavy amounts of rain in the Jewish state. But the Israeli Antiquities Authority is also enjoying the rainy season, as yet again, the storms unearthed an incredible find. This time, 2 ancient clay figurines of horses in 2 different sites across northern Israel. According to the IAA, one was found near Tel Aker or Aker and dates back to the Hellenistic period at around 200 BCE. And the second figurine was uncovered in the area of Kfar Upin in the Beit She'an Valley, and it dates back to the Iron Age, or about 800 to 600 BCE. Incidentally, the Kfar Upin figurine was found by none other than an archaeologist from the Antiquities Authority while out on a family trip in search of mushrooms. Ayelet Kider Goldberg was with her 2 daughters near the site of the discovery, so while they didn't find any mushrooms, they did stumble across the figurine, which is arguably a much more exciting find. And after, Goldberg said that she immediately recognized that it was an ancient figurine from the Iron Age, the period of the Kingdom of Israel. And she added that it is a fascinating and spectacular find. The 2,800-year-old figurine depicts a horse's head with the rider's left hand apparent on the neck of the horse, and the statue is adorned with red stripes. As for the second figurine, it was found by passerby Michael Markin and depicts a horse with reins and a harness, and it too was painted red. According to University of Haifa archaeologists and art historian Dr. Adi Ehrlich, horse figurines were common objects during the first millennium because the use of horses had greatly increased at the time. She then added that figurines depicting horses were often carved with riders, but that almost only men were depicted in figurines as riding horses, while women were carved in the context of fertility, motherhood, and sexuality, which attests to gender roles in society during the Iron Age. Meanwhile, Nir Distelfeld, an inspector with the Antiquities Authority Theft Prevention Unit, has again called on all citizens to report to the IAA when they find an ancient artifact, so that they can at least extract all the archaeological information from the site. The annual Bloomberg Innovation Index for 2019 has just been released, and Israel has jumped up from 10th place in 2018 to 5th place in 2019, beating out the United States, China, Russia, Singapore, Japan, and many others. This is the 7th annual Bloomberg Innovation Listing, which analyzes and ranks over 200 competing economies across 7 different metrics, including R&D spending, manufacturing capability, concentration of public high-tech companies, and patent activity. Each country then receives a total rating out of 100, and the top 95 scoring countries make the final list, though only the top 60 of those are then published by Bloomberg. Now, Israel took first place in R&D intensity and second place in researcher concentration, but the Jewish state only scored 4th in patent activity, 8th in productivity, and 33rd in manufacturing ability. The United States, by comparison, was 10th in R&D, but 1st in both patent activity and high-tech density. It was in part for these reasons that the United States rose to 8th place on the listing from 11th last year. As for the top 4 countries that beat Israel on the list, this year's top spot went to South Korea for the 6th time, followed by Germany, Finland, and Switzerland. After arriving in Israel earlier this week, Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary has just brought some great news with him. The head of the Irish budget airline has now announced that at least 4 new routes from Tel Aviv are set to become operational in the company's latest expansion, bringing the total number of Israeli-European routes on Ryanair to 15. New destinations from Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion and Eilat Ovda airports include Athens, Thessaloniki, Sofia, and Bucharest, and according to O'Leary, this is just the start. When asked, he said he would like to slowly introduce domestic flights between Tel Aviv and Eilat as well, at a cost of just 40 shekels, or less than a third of the competition's prices. Additionally, Israeli Channel 13 News also reported that O'Leary explained how people are fed up with destinations like the Canary Islands and other such places, while Israel has wonderful beaches and an amazing culinary scene. Quote, "If we can offer reasonable prices, then Israel, with its beautiful weather and beaches, can become a preferred destination," end quote. Now, Ryanair has been flying in and out of Israel since 2015, and in the last year alone, over 600,000 passengers traveled between Tel Aviv and destinations in Europe, a 200% increase over the year before. And with all these trends expected to continue, that number is only going to rise. The Israeli Bereshit, or Genesis, spacecraft has now finally arrived at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Base in Florida, from where it's set to be launched to the moon next month. And according to Ido Antebi, the CEO of Space IL, which led the project, the craft is more than ready for its mission. Last month, after the final components were added and tests were completed, SpaceIL and IAI engineers together prepared the craft for its final transfer to Florida. And in a statement released last week, Entebbe said that after 8 years of hard work, quote, "Our dream has come true. We finally have a spacecraft, and shipping the spacecraft to the US is the first stage of a complicated and historic journey to the moon. This is the first of many exciting moments as we look forward to the forthcoming launch in Cape Canaveral," end quote. Now, the Bereshit spacecraft stands at about 1.5 meters or around 5 feet tall, and it has 4 carbon fiber legs. It's also equipped with many measurement tools, including a device to measure magnetic fields, and it'll also be Israel's first longer-range Israeli spacecraft of this type. But most importantly, it was also given the, quote, "best of humanity" to hold on to, a digital time capsule containing children's drawings, photos, songs, and other such information on human culture and history. And after taking off from Florida in the next month or so, the capsule will then remain on the moon for years, if not decades. Finally, the capsule is scheduled to launch on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket, but is set to arrive in a so-called soft landing. If successful, Israel would be the 4th country to ever carry out this type of descent into the surface of the moon with an unmanned craft, following the United States, China, and Russia. The Oscars are fast approaching, and Israelis are getting very excited for the awards, especially following the release of the long-awaited nominations on Tuesday. In fact, it seems that Israeli director Guy Nativ's short film Skin is all anyone can talk about. The film will be competing in the Best Live-Action Short Film category and focuses on the fact-based story of a young man in America raised by skinheads, who then turns his back on the violent and hate-filled movement he was raised in. Additionally, the themes of hate, violence, and racism in the film are unfortunately themes that Nativ is no stranger to. In fact, he told Haaretz that, quote, "As a Jew, I don't feel as safe in America as I once did," adding that suddenly it's not so simple to be a Jew. You have to think twice about whether to put on a kippah in public. It's disturbing, end quote. Well, perhaps with the release of Skin and other similar films this year, that trend may finally change, especially as a full-length version of Skin is now set to premiere at the Berlin Film Festival next month. Now, Israelis are no strangers at the Oscars, though. Just to name a few, past nominees include Waltz with Bashir, directed by Ari Folman, Ajami, directed by Yaron Shani and Skandar Kopti, and 5 Broken Cameras, directed by Emad Burnat and Guy Davidi. And I'm sure the future holds many, many more. Finally, the Oscars are set to take place on February 24th in Hollywood, and I know that I, for one, will be tuning in. Moving on, the first Israeli lottery winners of 2019 have just been announced, so prepare to get jealous, because the $8.1 million jackpot prize has just been awarded to an unnamed couple of Olim, or immigrants, from France. Speaking to Israel Hayom News, the couple said that they were, quote, "happy that they immigrated to Israel and now are even happier." And who can blame them? For just one ticket costing $17, the pair of French Israelis who now reside in Tel Aviv have just become millionaires. So how the husband and wife were able to keep the news a secret throughout the Sabbath is beyond me. Further, like the adults they are, they've already planned some very responsible investments towards their family's future in the Jewish state. Again, speaking with Israel Hayom, the husband explained that first, it's important for them to give to charity. Quote, "We've given all these years and we will do so now as well," end quote. But next, he said that they plan to tithe their winnings and buy each of their children their own apartment as well. And now for our Hebrew word of the day, in honor of a pair of very lucky French immigrants, today's word is hagrala, meaning raffle or lottery. Now personally, I don't like to gamble, but if you're not willing to play, then you can never actually win a hagrala or lottery. And there are many different kinds of hagralot or raffles to win. It could be a small community hagrala or lottery where the winner gets some baked goods from a neighbor, or perhaps you've got your eye on the Mega Millions hagrala. Whatever the case, just remember that every hagrala has different odds. And the Mega Millions jackpot, for example, offers odds to win of just 1 in over 302 million. To put that into perspective, you're 20 times more likely to be attacked by a shark and 20,000 times more likely to be struck by lightning. So if you're not feeling lucky, best just stick to bingo. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy and cool with a low of around 53 or 12 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect partly cloudy skies and a slight rise in temperatures to a daily high of about 73 or 23 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.69 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.